And I'm so happy in it. I just want people to know that it's an option to do that. And it's a lot better of an option than cheating.
Yeah.
Being monogamous, but not actually because you're cheating.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their funny, sexy, and fascinating stories as they take us on their journey. We always strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy and positive approach to non-monogamy.
However, everyone approaches it a little differently. And at its core, our show is about hearing, highlighting, and learning from the different experiences and approaches people have. With that in mind, it is important to remember that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of our own.
So sit back, relax, and just accept the fact that your time with us will be spent in an awkward turmoil of laughter and arousal. We should also let you know that this podcast will hopefully include some explicit language.
If that kind of thing offends you, we suggest you keep listening until it no longer does. If you're under 18, you either need to stop listening or go get your parents and you can listen as a family. The choice is yours. Enjoy!
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 8. I'm Emma.
And I'm Finn.
And today on today's show, we interview Samantha and Aaron, who we were introduced to from some other friends of ours, and they are both in the swinging and the polyamorous communities.
So it's a really fun interview. We get to hear about the crossover between those two, their viewpoints and their experiences in both worlds, which is kind of a unique opportunity. And we had a really awesome talk with them. Mm-hmm. It runs a little longer than normal, but it's definitely worth sticking around because we cover a lot of really good information.
Yes, for sure. Also, we wanted to mention a couple things up front here. As you may have noticed, we changed up the intro a little bit to our podcast, and that was based on some feedback we got. Nothing related to this episode or any other episodes that we've recorded, just something we wanted to add.
Yeah, if in case you're not sure what we're talking about, we added just a little piece about the opinions on the show of our guests do not reflect our own. It was some feedback that we got from other people. And we wanted to say thank you to anybody out there who has sent us feedback. We definitely take it into account, and we really appreciate it because our goal here is to continue to make the show better and better every week for you guys. So thank you to anyone who's given us feedback.
Yes. We also had a couple people sign up with our Cassie link on our website.
And some of them even left us a review, so they got a 90-day free trial. So if you want some of that goodness,
yes,
go to our website,
which is normalizingnonmonogamy.com,
and leave us, use the link, sign up for Cassidy, and then go over to iTunes or Stitcher and leave us a review.
The other resource quickly on our website that we wanted to mention is STD Test Express, and that is a great resource for anyone wanting to get tested. It's easy and fast and much easier than sometimes having that awkward conversation with your doctor.
Yep, so go check those out. They're on the resources page. Also on our website, for every show that we do, will be a show notes page where anything that we talk about in the show, whether it's a book, another podcast, anything where you guys might need to go look something up, there'll be a link there. So if something comes up, you don't have to write it down while you're driving. Just check out our website and it'll be there.
And finally, you can also find us on Twitter or Cassidy under the screen name NNM Podcast.
And now we'll stop rambling so you can hear the stuff you actually came here for, and we'll head on over to the show. All right, hi guys, we're here with Samantha and Aaron, some new friends of ours that were introduced to us through other guests on the show a little while back, and they have a really unique approach to the non-monogamy lifestyle that we've not really seen before, so we're going to turn it over to them at this point to give us a little bit of background on how they got into this and how they approach it, and also just to briefly introduce themselves before that.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I am 33 years old. I've been poly for 4 years, and Aaron and I have been together for 3 years.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I've been poly for, I'm 35. I've been poly specifically for about almost 5 years. but was also like a swinger in previous relationship before that for a couple of years. So non-monogamous for going about 6 years.
It sounds like you guys explored non-monogamy a little before you met each other. Do you mind talking a little bit about maybe your individual stories and how they came together?
Yeah, so Samantha wants me to go first. I'll go first. So as I mentioned, I was in a previous relationship, and that was a monogamous one. I'd gotten married at 19, started a family, and it was great, and have a lot of good years there. And had, I don't know, like I said, about 6 years back or so, the idea of swinging and non-monogamy kind of came up in conversation, and she'd asked about it, my wife at the time. And I wasn't opposed to it. We were generally pretty open, laid back people. And we, like I said, we got married young. We were kind of like go-getters and do it our own way, just from the get-go, kind of like, throw the scripts to the wind and do what we want, right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So she approached you about it originally.
Yeah, she did. And it actually just came up. It was actually funny because, of course, when you're at swingers events and everything, everyone asks, like, so who brought it up? And how did you guys get started, right? That's always the icebreaker questions. And yeah, we were just laying in bed one night, and she said, have you ever thought about having sex with other people? And I was like, well, of course I've thought about it. Like, everyone thinks about it.
Right.
Why do you ask? And then she's like, would you like to try swinging? And I was like, I think so. This is kind of how I answer these things. I kind of like say yes before I really think about my own feelings in it. But I was genuinely open to it. We were, it was exciting to think about for us. And so we actually, like within the next couple of weeks, went to a club that was nearby where we lived. It wasn't too far of a drive. And this was in October, actually. So it was actually a few weeks before Halloween. And so this club was having, like a newbies, or a welcoming night.
Swingers club?
Yeah, swingers club. I'm sorry. Yeah. Should have made that clear.
I think Halloween's like the national swinger holiday. But
yeah.
Whether you're a swinger or not.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, we went there a couple of weeks before, and we just kind of scoped it out, and we met some people and just talked, and then we went home, and then we're like, that was really fun. It was a much different environment than we thought it was going to be. Everyone was really welcoming, and it wasn't as predatory or as pushy as one might think when you think about swingers. We do like getting out to clubs normally and dancing, and that normal club scene is just not nearly as respectful or kind and genuine as what we found swingers clubs to be. So suddenly we were like, this is our new favorite place to go, even if we just want to dance.
We can relate to that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys didn't know anybody, have any friends or that you knew of that were swingers before this, right?
No, we did not.
Okay.
Yeah. So we went back for Halloween, right? And that was a big party, and that was really fun. And that started the swinging process for us. That was good. That went pretty well for like a little over a year, almost 2 years. And then we met and made a lot of friends, and in that lifestyle, and just kind of got our footing in that. The, I guess, transition for me from swinging to poly, or just different types of non-monogamy, because swinging, we were very much, you're still coupled, and we were doing everything together, and that kind of thing. Where polyamorous is more, exploring relationships with others, or intimate feelings or emotions with other people. So I hadn't really even thought about that or heard all that much about it until we met a couple at the club that expressed that they were polyamorous, and we're like, oh, really? Tell us more about that. The short version of the story, without disclosing all the things that everyone kind of has their own process in previous relationships, and the piece we'll share is that the non-monogamy approach, or swinging, or exploring polyamory with my now ex, it taught us a lot about ourselves, and it really like held a magnifying glass up to all the little issues that we had in the way that we communicated, and unhealthy codependencies. I began to realize the ways that her mental health concerns and conditions were actually negatively playing out in how she was respecting my needs and desires and kind of riding those roller coasters. So there's a long story there, but ultimately that relationship didn't work out, and I needed to end that relationship.
Right.
She met someone else in poly and seems happy with him now, and through that process of being poly towards the end of that relationship, I dated other people, and that's actually how I initially met Samantha, was during that dating process, and we
Right.
we've continued dating. So.
I think maybe it's a natural or a knee-jerk reaction to people, especially people who want to take a negative approach to this lifestyle, to say, oh, well, it was the fact that you were poly or the fact that you started swinging that ultimately was what ended your relationship or caused that to happen. And would you say that that's was a factor, or was it just it highlighted maybe the things that weren't a good fit? I don't know. I don't know the best way to ask that. I think what people like to say is, oh, well, they were swingers because they had a bad relationship and then it caused them to get a divorce.
Yeah.
And it's not usually that simple.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a fair question. And I definitely think it was a factor. However, I don't think it was the cause. Like you said, that, that there's always multiple reasons why relationships don't work out. It's not like this one thing, that usually builds up, and you're either like growing together and growing through those issues, or you're growing apart in them.
Right.
I think that non-monogamy in general, whether swingers or poly or, just all the ways in between, it requires that you have very healthy communication, and that each party is able to express their needs and wants in a healthy and safe space, in a healthy and safe way. And then have that be respected. And even if they don't line up, maybe one person wants one thing and another person doesn't want that or wants a different thing, but that should be able to be talked about. If those types of things can't be talked about, it actually becomes, I think, in non-monogamy, it becomes really obvious because there's a lot that you're going to have to talk about. But what it definitely taught me through that process is that, yes, non-monogamy was a factor, and it showed me how muted I was in my own emotions,
right,
and how I was not good at all about advocating for my own needs and feelings, or even verbalizing them. Those are all things that I learned. And so that process is actually, whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous, those are actually really healthy life skills, and everyone kind of comes from different backgrounds and is trying to unlearn some unhealthy habits and unhealthy communication styles and things like that, so that they can be healthy whole individuals.
Yeah.
I do think that non-monogamy is kind of like trial by fire. You're going to learn and grow through it, or you'll decide it's not for you and go back. And that doesn't mean that you can't continue to learn and grow, even if you go back to monogamy or stay monogamous. That's not bad. But that self-reflection it's required, and you won't get by without doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it may not have happened, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If it may not have happened, through the swinging and non-monogamy at that time, it may have happened 10 years in the future.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and it could have been something else that triggered it, I shouldn't say triggered it, but, started that growth. And like I said, you either grow together in it because you have the tools to do so,
right,
or you grow apart. And that's really true for monogamous relationships too. And everyone likes to talk about, opening up, of course it's going to end your relationship. It's like, well, a lot of relationships end. And that's the reality of it.
Right.
We like to think that
absolutely.
This story that lots of people stay together, but that's, just tracking divorce rates. We know that's not true.
Right.
Whether monogamous or not.
Right. No, absolutely.
Just like Dan Savage says, just because a relationship ends doesn't mean that it was a bad one.
Right.
Or that it was a failure.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I know it's a fairly intimate question to ask, so I really appreciate the honesty on that.
Yeah.
So on your side, Samantha, what brought you to where you guys are today?
Yeah. Well, I like what you brought up, Emma, the Dan Savage quote. just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it was a failure or a bad relationship, because I truly believe that. I was in a monogamous marriage as well before meeting Aaron. We had been together for 5 years. And during that time, it was a good relationship. And, we were happy together and had a lot of good times. And then, kind of started growing apart a little bit. And that was, during that time, I was attending a meetup group that was a sexology discussion group. And so I was kind of meeting people and hearing about different perspectives on relationships, different perspectives on sexuality. And I grew up in a pretty conservative household and, kind of a religious conservative household, and monogamy was the only relationship style that I knew about. That was the case when I got married as well. That seemed like the way to go. That was what, the only thing I knew and what I wanted at the time. And so kind of through the discussion group, I started to become exposed to other alternative options.
And, and honestly, I grew up in a fairly liberal home, and
me too.
Even in that environment, it's not like we were learning about this, at our, we didn't sit around and talk about it at the dinner table. So I think it's not something that's common in anyone's relationship or upbringing, unless I guess that maybe they're brought up.
I'll say if their parents practice non-monogamy of some sort and teach their children about it, I think that may be, I guess, the way children learn about it. But in general, no, I don't think it's taught.
Yeah, I agree. And, in my family growing up, there was a lot of divorce. And what I saw was a lot of examples of unhappy monogamous relationships or monogamous relationships that didn't work out. And so it wasn't all bad, but I guess, it was kind of interesting and refreshing when I learned about some alternative options.
Yeah.
So at the discussion group, I met someone who was polyamorous, and, that was where I first learned the term. And, it really blew my mind. I really couldn't wrap my mind around it when I first learned about it. But, during that time period, I was doing a lot of, seeking and growing and learning things about my sexuality, things about these different relationship ideas. And I read the book Sex at Dawn and the book The Ethical Slut.
Yep.
And the book Mating in Captivity.
Oh, yep. All good books.
All good stuff. And it was really informative. And through that process, I started to become, kind of got my mind wrapped around the idea of non-monogamy, generally. And then the more I read and the more I thought about it, the more sense it made to me. And it felt true, like the idea of being able to have intimate and possibly loving connections with more than one person felt true to me as a person, philosophically. I had never experienced it. I didn't know, but it just seemed like it made sense to me. And I really liked the freedom of the idea of being able to, it's like meet someone and interact with them and acknowledge what's there.
Yeah.
Rather than, that seemed like such an open possibility, rather than kind of feeling boxed into this person that you're married to is the one person that you can have romance with. It's the one person that you can have intimacy at that level with. No one else, you can't do that with anyone else. And so the idea was really intriguing and attractive to me. And throughout this time, I was talking with my partner, kind of exploring those ideas together. And he was curious about the idea, wasn't as open to it as I was. And so, we went to a swingers club a few times because he wanted to see how he felt about it. And we both did. We had never experienced, we knew about it in theory, but we didn't know about it in practice.
Right.
Went to, tried out a little bit of swinging, and I loved it. And he ultimately felt like it wasn't for him.
Okay.
He felt much more monogamously geared.
So you had gone to these discussions and workshops while you guys were together.
Yes.
And took the ideas back to him and then approached it, went to a swinging event or club.
Right,
Okay.
Exactly. Like there was probably a 2-year time span from when, well, let me see. There was probably a 3-year time span from when I first learned about non-monogamy and began to think about it and, of course, discuss it with my partner at the time until he and I actually decided, okay, like let's try this out and see how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And by trying it out, it wasn't that we went full into polyamory. We went to a swingers club and all we did was dance and just kind of, we were in the environment, observing, looking around, seeing what it was all about.
Right.
And then the next time we went to a swingers club and we kissed another couple, and that was it. And we did that a few more times. And each time we kind of talked about it with each other, how we felt. And I was having a great time. He was too, to an extent. But that process kind of brought to the forefront that we were realizing we were on different pages, not just with the non-monogamy piece, but sort of with a few other things as well. We were kind of growing into different perspectives on our life goals and things like that. So through that process, we decided to separate. And during that period of separation, I was exploring more with polyamory and dating other people to see, if this is really something that I wanted to do. And so the thing with polyamory is, like I said, in theory, it seemed great. Mm-hmm. However, my biggest concern was stability, because I loved the idea of being able to connect with different people and having more love to go around, more connections to go around. And I am someone who really values stability and wants to have, I value commitment and want to have that with someone. So I wasn't sure if polyamory would allow that, or if it would be more free flowing, like you just kind of connect with different people at different times and it's not really like a consistent or stable thing. That was a big question I had. And, I actually talked with some of my family members, my mom at the time, about it. And that was one of her main concerns as well, from her perspective, which I think is not uncommon for different generations. Yeah. She was worried about me kind of not having that stability. And so
did she, just expand on that a minute. Did she you're doing fine, by the way. You're doing great. Did she, I guess she said she was worried, but did she overall at least be open to having the conversation with you?
Well, was she open?
Or I guess did she react negatively at all, other than showing her concern for you, of being worried about the stability and how it's going to affect your relationship? Did having that discussion, open and honest discussion about your relationship style with your mother, affect the way she responded, or even affect your relationship with her, is maybe a better way to put it?
Yes. I did not really intend to tell my mom about the fact that I was trying polyamory, but it kind of came out through a series of events. And so, yes, it came up and she learned about this. And yes, she had a negative reaction to it. You know, she didn't understand it. I mean, and I get it, because like I said, when I first learned about poly, I didn't get it at all either. It really didn't make sense to me. So I understand that. And I didn't expect her to totally grasp it and be on board with it. But it did drive a wedge between us.
Yeah.
A little bit. And, you know, she didn't understand it. She was concerned about me. I think, felt like I might be kind of, I don't know, just going down a path that wasn't going to put me in a good place.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Has that gotten better over the years?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it has gotten better with my mom. And to her great credit, she still says she doesn't understand it. You know, we've had many conversations where I try to explain the concept to her and everything. And she's, you know, still says she just fundamentally doesn't understand it. However, to her credit, she tries to, and she's open to hearing about it. And, you know, here I am 4 years into it, and I am stable and I am happy and it's working out okay. And so I think, you know, that allows her to feel okay with it as well, and know that, you know, she may not agree with my relationship choices. However, she's happy that I'm happy, and you know, it's okay.
I would even say that at this point it's still early on in the stages, right? I mean, considering the length of a relationship or your life, 4 years into it is still pretty early, I would say, for someone to necessarily be 100% on board with anything. So I think that you're there with her. I mean, that's light years ahead of where we are. I mean,
really?
We hide it from everybody, and I think that's probably true for most people. So I think just the fact that you don't have to hide that's really awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and I totally agree. I feel really happy and grateful about the fact that I mean, I'm out to my mom, my dad, you know, a couple of my grandparents, and most of my friends. And I know that a lot of people don't feel that they have that luxury or haven't gotten to that point. And so, you know, I'm appreciative that I have been able to do that. And I've had mostly positive reactions, you know, overall.
Right.
I think this podcast is our starting point to hopefully get more comfortable, get there eventually.
That's, I guess so. Maybe, and to just to summarize sort of the contrast between the way that you guys both got into it. It sounds like on your side, Samantha, that it was more of a exploration of the relationship types, and that swinging was just the gateway to polyamory, maybe. I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but on Aaron's side, it was a very sort of blunt, like, what do you think about having sex with other people? It sounds like it was a little bit different approach at the beginning, but yeah, you guys have kind of come to a similar place, or obviously found yourselves together, so you're not that far apart.
Yeah, different starting points, and that's something that I actually think that Samantha's approach of exploring all that and doing the reading and all that stuff, that's a much better approach. I think that when you just kind of dive in, you know, and Max and I, we were one of those couples, and we met plenty of other ones who they dive into swinging and they're like, oh man, we've heard about it and this is great and it's fun and it's exciting. And then you kind of you wait to address the issues that are coming up until they've kind of built up enough to become a problem. And then when we went from, you know, the idea of swinging to polyamory, it was really, it was because my wife at the time met someone that she was interested in doing that with. Through the swinging lifestyle, we met another couple that was, you know, they were more poly and wanted to build more of a polyamorous relationship with people. And so, of course, me being open and very laid back, I'm like, oh, yeah, I think that's okay. I was initially reluctant, thinking like, well, you know, what does this poly thing really look like? I think my suggestion, or if I could go back and give myself advice, would be to say, okay, we can do that, but let's not just jump right into it with this person you met. I think that's kind of akin to when you meet people who are like, well, there was something wrong with our relationship, so we tried swinging. Or, hey, I met this really cool person. Can we be open now because I like them? It's kind of like, that's really the wrong reason to open up, and there's probably some reasons why they're seeking that elsewhere. And that doesn't mean it's always going to end, but if you approach it like honestly, and you can both talk about what it is maybe that you're wanting in those other relationships, that process, that communication process and learning process is very important.
Yeah.
And you either do that by diving in and, learning it, in kind of will end up being kind of a messy way for me, honestly.
Right.
Or take Samantha's approach where you do the reading, you decide that this is more of a mindset that you want to live by, or this is more genuinely your approach to relationships anyways. So, and then you explore it, more responsibly.
Right. Yeah. So have you guys, since you both kind of had a blend of poly and swinger in your backgrounds, when you guys came together, did you sort of keep that blend, or have you guys gravitated more towards one side or the other at this point?
Well, when Aaron and I met, we were more focused on polyamory. We met each other on a website for polyamorous dating. It's polymatchmaker.com. And we were both dating other people. Aaron was still with his ex, and so she was his more primary partner, and I was dating him as more of a secondary. I know not everyone uses those hierarchical terms. And
that was our dynamic at the time.
That was the dynamic at the time. Yeah. And also we were long distance. Yeah. So we lived about 2 hours apart at the time. So it was more focused on poly at the time. And then about a year and a half into our relationship, and that was during the time frame when Aaron was splitting up with his ex. And so the dynamic, there were a lot of changes in the dynamic between us and the dynamics he had. And so, a year and a half into it, we moved in together. So we were no longer long distance, and we were still pretty poly at the time. But what was interesting is that once we lived together, we realized that we were actually more interested in dating together, like dating other couples as a couple, because we really enjoyed spending time together and wanted more of that. Since we had kind of been long distance for so long, we kind of were still couldn't get enough of each other and wanted to spend more time together rather than apart.
Yeah.
And so through that, period of initially living together, we started to become more focused on swinging, in the sense of meeting other couples together as a couple and making friends. I mean, when we say swinging, it's not just about sex. It's more like making friends together that we also play with if everyone wants to. We've also met other couples on a swinger website where it's like, hey, you guys are awesome. Let's hang out. And then we don't actually end up playing together. And that's cool too.
Yeah. We've done that too.
Yeah. And so that's been more of our focus, although we still definitely consider ourselves polyamorous, and we still do date separately. However, it's more of realizing at this stage in our relationship, given that we're still somewhat I consider our relationship still somewhat new, we're more focused on swinging.
Right.
And that may change, say 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we may say, all right, we feel like we have a little bit more time where we can go on dates separately from each other, and that feels okay. Yeah. And we're totally, open to that dynamic being whatever makes sense for us at the stage that we're in.
Right.
Yeah. And that's actually something that I feel like we've been able to do really well together. I think it's because of the communication tools that I, had to learn and realized I didn't have at all. And the ones that Samantha just has naturally. I don't know. She seems at them. But we've been able to talk through that. And one of the things I like about the name of your guys' podcast is it was normalizing non-monogamy. And non-monogamy is that umbrella term that I actually like better, because I've met a lot of people who are swingers who define swinging in a very certain way, and then a lot of people who are polyamorous who define it a certain way. And there's so much crossover between those communities, and honestly, I see it as one big community. Everyone's saying, well, I'm a swinger, I don't want any of that romance, but we definitely like to be friends and hang out and go to each other's events and this and that. And I'm like, okay, that's a relationship, but what you've done is you've communicated expectations, boundaries, and kind of communicate those clearly, right? And so in all of those, whether you label it swinger, polyamorous, it's all about being able to communicate your intentions, your desires, your expectations, having healthy boundaries, and being able to apply those reliably, which makes you a trustworthy person. So Samantha and I, because we have both kind of dabbled in all those different quote unquote lifestyles, it really feels like one lifestyle, at least for me.
Right.
And we have people that we've met at swinging events who we're now really good friends with, and I almost consider our relationship with them more polyamorous. And then we've met people who are polyamorous, but just because of the context or whatever else, we've hung out casually with them, and just that's how much time you have to make. And so it has everything to do with just communicating those, like I said, intentions. And so we've been able to do that, and those intentions can be fluid. It can change.
Well, I guess you kind of ran over the question I was going to ask, which is making my job really easy, because the question was that we had talked about before talking to you guys was, what do you guys, as people who have been in the poly world and in the swinging world, where do you really see a difference between, hey, we like to make really good friends who we have sex with? Like, what's the difference between that and an actual relationship or a poly relationship? And it sounds like for you guys, the line is not really, it's sort of like, why do we need to put a label on it? And so that's really kind of cool. I don't know. That's sort of what I took away from what you said. I don't know if that's what you intended to say, but
yeah, I'm always kind of ranting about labels not being very useful most of the time. But Samantha, she's more comfortable with labels than I usually am. But yeah, she's fine. It's like, well, call me whatever you want. Like, I know what I am. Where I take it a little more personally, and I'm like, no, don't misunderstand me by applying a label that you're making assumptions about.
Yeah. I think that's why we wanted to call this normalizing non-monogamy too, and not try to focus it in on certain swinging or polyamorous relationships or the other types of triads that people may have work as well. So,
and I'm sure there's people out there who will listen to this and say, oh, well, there's a huge distinction between those, and that's fine. I can't really disagree with that. For some people, it seems like that line's not real distinct, and others it probably is. I guess it's really all about how you see it within your own relationship and within yourself.
Yeah, how you personally identify.
And
I mean, the terms and definitions are useful because it helps people communicate about a particular approach to lifestyle. So, but I think one of the things, I think it was at a Mark group or something, the quote that they use about like these details should be descriptive, not prescriptive. And so I feel like that I actually found that to make a lot of sense, where it's like, yes, I can say, I'm Aaron from such and such location, and I was born in this area, and I do this and this for work, and people might make a lot of assumptions about that, and that's okay. And they might jump to a lot of conclusions about what kind of person I am or whatever else. But as long as they know that those conclusions are like descriptive and they could change and morph as soon as they're given more information about me, and it's not like, oh, I know exactly what Aaron is all about. Yeah. I've summed them up. My mind's made up. I'll never change it.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that, just having that general open-minded approach as you're receiving information, especially about other human beings, like individuals who are we're all very complex. peoples.
And you throw sex in there and it makes it even more complex.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in terms of my perspective on the difference between swinging and poly, I think more often than not, swinger couples that we've met only play together. That's a more common distinction where, it's like they're not open to breaking off separately. Like whatever they're doing it together as a couple. Versus poly, it's pretty much standard that, you break off and go on separate dates.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not always. Even under that, there's all different ways that you could decide to do that. And the other difference I've noticed is swingers tend to be sex is a more primary focus, or no, not a more primary. Sex is a primary focus with swinging, which it may not be with poly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's a fair description.
Yeah, I guess at the core level, you could say, well, we're swingers and we met these people through swinging, but we've never had sex with them, so therefore we haven't ever swung with them. We just hung out with them, right? I guess maybe the sex is what takes you over that line into now you're a swinger.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But there's also lots of people who would. Anyhow, this is why it's.
Yeah,
but
it could be a 5-hour discussion, right?
They're in the lifestyle, and they just like the flirtiness of it. They like to go to events where they can be in a just a sexy outfit or dress up for the themed event and do that fun swinger event. I would still say that they count. I mean, they're in the community. They're swingers.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. So everything I just said was wrong. I apologize. I don't mean to offend any swingers or poly people.
We're just having a discussion.
No, I know.
I think it's just like anything else. Like if someone, you let people self-identify, and you don't try to tell them that they are one thing or another.
Right. I think that's the main point we're all trying to make.
So one other question I had, sort of about the blend between the two, and that you guys are sort of in both worlds. Do you ever see any pushback when, let's say, you go on a date with somebody for more of a poly dynamic, that they look at and say, oh, well, you're a swinger, I'm not really comfortable with that. Or vice versa, you go to meet some swingers and they're not really comfortable with the fact that you guys are also into poly. Do you ever see any pushback from either side, or negative feedback maybe is a better term?
I really haven't gotten a lot of pushback or negative reactions about that. I like to be open about it. So, for instance, if we meet up with a couple that we met on the swinger website and we get together and we disclose that we're also poly, they may say, oh, well, we're not poly. We're not open to that. We only date together and we're just interested in swinging. And then we say, cool, like, that's great. We would love to interact with you guys on that level.
Yeah.
And usually that's pretty much the end of that. It doesn't, they don't feel pressure. We don't, feel any need to take it further on that side. Or it might just be an interesting discussion where they, we can learn from each other's experiences. So that's on a personal level. I haven't gotten any pushback on it. I will say that, so there's a swingers social group that I've gone to for women. It happens once a month, and I've gone to it a few times. And
is that Girls Uncorked?
Yes.
Okay. Just for anybody out there who's looking for that, I think it's a pretty good resource.
I think they have them all over the country.
Yeah. Right. It's great. It's fabulous. The one I go to is very well attended. It's a really wonderful group of women. And I have, when I introduce myself there, I say I'm a swinger and I'm poly. And I've been surprised that other people are surprised by that. Other of the women there are surprised by that. So maybe I've gotten some negative reactions from that, but mostly it's just that people want to learn about it.
Yeah, they're curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I would say similar, especially in the swinging community. And I think I think in general, I think it has a lot to do with how we approach things anyways, where sometimes you meet couples and they're very kind of like forward, they're pushy in what they want or that kind of thing. But we're not that. So when people meet us, we meet, we chat, we learn about each other, and you try to create some level of connection and, and explore that. And so in those situations in the swinging community, I feel like that, like you said, they're mostly curious. For me, I wouldn't say it's, directly negative toward me, but I have had conversations with people that are polyamorous and don't really agree with the idea of swinging because they have for all their own reasons. But my understanding is they have the perspective that it's just about sex and there's no friendships and that kind of thing. And so they tend to avoid those communities because they want to date and build a more meaningful relationship, which is great. And that makes sense. But they have, in conversations with them, they do kind of have like just a perspective of swingers that I think isn't always fair or true, just because of all the differences or different ways that people approach swinging.
Right.
I think that, I think that there's just some misunderstandings about the fact that in each of those communities, polyamorous and swinging and non-monogamy, kind of overarching all of those, everyone approaches it differently, and they all kind of randomly pick labels that maybe I shouldn't say randomly. They pick labels that they feel identify with, and then, again, those should be descriptive, not prescriptive. And then you should just talk to the person and see, well, how do you approach swinging? Wow, that sounds exactly like polyamory.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you approach polyamory? Well, some people are like, well, I have one, anchor partner or someone that I've been with for a little while, but I really enjoy, just new relationship energy, and I'm meeting people and then moving on to the next. Like, I've met some people that way too, and I'm like, wow, you're a swinger. Like, but of course they would be offended by that label. So it's, again, it's like you let people self-identify. But
yeah.
I think there are generally sometimes misconceptions because they make assumptions about what that label means.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was going to project myself into the body of a poly person talking to a swinger person, one of the things that I guess I would have thought came up more was the topic of safety, and maybe that because you're swinging and you don't have that level of connection, that you're exposed to more risk of contracting, STIs or some type of something undesirable.
Well, maybe one would assume that you're more active, like you're sleeping with more people swinging than poly, but that may not necessarily be true.
Not that you're sleeping with more, but that the connection isn't there to vet them as well. And
yeah, that's true.
I guess we know personally that that's not necessarily a true stereotype, but I guess, have you guys experienced any of that within that crossover? Sorry, all our questions are about the crossover point of the Venn diagram and swinging and poly.
I think we've been, I'll let Samantha answer too, but I think we've been pretty fortunate that pretty much everyone we've met that's in the poly community and honestly in the swinger community, they're pretty well educated about those types of risks and the ways to prevent them and the conversations you should have beforehand. So risky behaviors during interactions, with other people are risky, whether you're poly or swinging.
Exactly.
I think that to your question, and I think in both communities that's understood. And so you kind of talk to people about like, well, you have the safer sex conversation before you interact with someone. You ask about their test results. You use barriers in ways that everyone agrees with. Like, just if you're having those conversations, whether swinging or poly, it's like that's honestly the most you can do.
Right.
Whether you just met them or no, we've been going out for 6 months, but even in poly, they have partners that have partners, and unless you go through this long interview and process to vet everyone and all their partners, there's a certain level of risk that everyone understands, and they kind of have the same checklist of things that make them feel comfortable with someone.
Yeah.
I've found that in both communities.
I think you're so much more aware. And I think,
yes,
like, this is a conversation that we have. Like, if we were going to meet you guys and play with you guys, we would have this conversation and we would be aware of this. If I was some single guy at a bar and I meet a girl and I'm like, okay, she actually wants to sleep with me. Oh, let's talk about let's talk about our STD testing process and like, let's kill that mood. I just don't think it happens in single world.
Yeah, it's a taboo subject. It's not normalized as far as like how to approach that. And even your comment about like, oh, it would kill the mood. It's like, that's unfortunate that
Right.
society sees it that way. But I totally understand. I would feel like it would kind of like interrupt that in that situation too. But it's like, yeah, I really wish we could change that. It needs to change. It needs to be a more normal conversation. Like,
Yeah.
hey, here's how I approach sex, and here's the things I do for, to stay safe in it. And
not only that, but even if you were willing to have that conversation, I would bet if you went into any bar on any given night and went down the bar and asked everybody the last time they were tested.
Right.
Some of them, I'm sure, have never been tested unless they had a scare of some kind and then they went and got tested to see what they had. For us, I mean, we get tested every 6 months, depending on what's going on.
Yeah,
and
sometimes more frequently.
I know a lot of people who do it even more frequently than that. And so to say, hey, you're at more of a risk, I feel like I'm at less of a risk, honestly, because I know what's going on around me and I'm not afraid to ask these people.
Less of a risk than if you were out.
Yeah, if I was just out mingling in the normal dating world. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, like it's interesting that the STI conversation, because when I first, I almost forget about it because it's not, we have our approach to it about how we manage risk, and it's really not an issue otherwise. Like we kind of just make sure to ask the questions, and then we get tested regularly, and we don't really worry a lot about it. However, that was not the case. That wasn't the case for me when I first started poly and swinging. And, it also wasn't really the case at the beginning of our relationship. I'm trying to remember actually, but.
We had test results. We talked about that.
Well, I mean, I guess in terms of the anxiety about it, like, well, I'll just speak for myself because I don't know exactly how it was for you. For me, when first started non-monogamy, I had a ton of anxiety about getting an STI or putting myself at risk for getting an STI. And, I had to work through that and learn more about the transmission, how transmission happens, how much risk there is, start getting tested regularly, kind of get used to that process of interacting with doctors and requesting a test, because not all doctors are super sex positive about that kind of thing, right. Unfortunately.
Yep.
It took me a little while to figure out how best to manage my own sexual health in that way. And that's one of the things that I do feel like I have gained from non-monogamy, is learning how to do that. And I feel a lot more confident in it now. Like you were saying, I feel like I know more what's going on with my own body, and I feel more confident in how to manage the risk around my sexual health.
In my opinion, it's a damn shame that, not that this is a negative approach to it, but it's a shame that one has to find their way into a subculture, so to speak,
of non-monogamy.
Non-monogamy, for that to be the case, right? It just sucks that in our society we don't have these skills taught to us or normalized. Why is it that we have to do this to get to the point where we're capable of having these conversations with our doctor and learning about getting tested and having the conversation with people? I don't know. It just kind of pisses me off. It's like,
it gets back to sex education, which is a whole rabbit hole we could go down.
About that too,
I totally agree. And I hope that from the healthcare perspective, I hope it's changing, because I had some pretty terrible interactions with one doctor in particular around this whole getting tested issue. And, it's just, there needs to be, the mentality needs to change. And there's still a lot of slut shaming that goes on even in the medical community and things like that. So, Yeah,
I had the joy of when I asked my doctor the first time, I said, well, when you do the blood test, can you also test for STIs and stuff? And he's like, oh, having some extracurricular activities, are we? And I was like, yeah. both of us are
Right.
together. And he's like, oh, okay. And he like did it. And from that point on, like we found another way to do it. We do it online now. There's ways to do it where you just fill it out online and
Go give your blood.
yeah, it's so much easier. You don't have to deal with some shitty doctor judging you about it. And
I didn't know that was an option. I just learned something.
Yeah.
well,
What's this site?
I don't want to shamelessly plug our affiliates here, but
No, you're good.
no, it's called STD Test Express.
I think we started using it
it's the
about
one that I use early on too.
Okay. Yeah, no, we love it. And so one of the things that we decided, like, if this podcast could pay for itself at some point, that'd be fantastic. But we're not just going to whore ourselves out to whatever advertising we can find. And so we picked ones that like we actually use and actually believe in. And we've been using them for a little while. It's
about a year. So we've been using a year and a half, and it's really easy. Like you give them the information, pick the test you want. They recommend tests based on what your risk level is. You go give your blood, and you pay for it like $100 or so, and then you get your results in like 24 hours.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Do they do urine too, or is it just blood?
Yeah,
they do the whole kit and caboodle.
Well, and I will say, just to not be totally negative on the medical community, is that, I did have, like I said, one very bad experience with a doctor, but since then I've interacted with several gynecologists who have been great.
Right.
So, my current gynecologist is very sex positive, doesn't drill me or ask questions. She does the test and, so.
Yeah. That's been my experience too. My doctor's been good about it. So.
And once this podcast is part of the medical curriculum at all major universities, hopefully we can break down some of those barriers. So.
Right.
So
yeah,
your homework tonight is to binge listen to 7 episodes of your choosing.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And one more thing about the STI conversation is I think it's important to be with someone who has the same risk tolerance that you do.
Yeah.
Or be able to align your risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Because before I met Aaron, I was dating someone who had a much lower risk tolerance than I did. And not that I feel like I have a very high risk tolerance, but, he wanted to see STI test results before interacting with someone. And he kind of wanted to go through more steps to make sure. So that's what we did for our relationship, because that was, the lowest risk tolerance is the one that you go to, and that was fine. However, it has been easier being with Aaron, given that we both naturally kind of have the same risk approach. So it makes it kind of a no-brainer. Like once we kind of worked through what we were going to do to make sure we were being careful and, protecting ourselves as much as possible, now it's basically a no-brainer for us.
Yeah. Well, you got to be willing to have that conversation too. Is what if something happens? We're at a higher risk, sure, because we're sleeping with more people potentially, and if something happens, we'll work through it as a couple. Like it's not necessarily the end of the world, but you got to be open to having that conversation, which is a good big starting point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's where the fear-based, all the fear and paranoia around sexuality, in this country, and all the fear and paranoia around STIs, I think feeds into, just an overly fearful approach to it. Because the reality is, if you do contract an STI, there is treatment for it.
Right.
Like in our country, in this day and age, there is treatment for it. Some things are more easily treated than others. And, sure, you don't want to contract something, and it's not, you want to avoid that from happening. However, if it does happen, chances are you'll be okay. You'll get treatment and you'll be fine. So just kind of bringing that fear down, I think was also helpful.
Yeah. And I think the bigger thing now is, maybe 20 years ago, some of these would have been a death sentence. But now
Right.
the bigger risk is really the social stigma that you have to deal with and the fallout from that, rather than on an actual purely physical health approach, you know. And
Right.
That's
so,
a really big positive for the medical community too. I
Yeah.
guess we were being negative about it earlier, but they've come a long way
oh
with
yeah,
everything.
no, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
well, I guess, I mean, we've talked a lot about all the benefits that you guys have seen from this within your relationship. Have there been any negative aspects or hurdles that you guys have had to overcome together? I mean, obviously there was some before you guys came together within your previous relationships, but since you've meshed together, have there been any hurdles?
Well, I would say jealousy is both a hurdle and a growth opportunity, in the sense of, the whole poly mindset in my mind of, feelings come up. Your job is to explore those and to figure out how to address those feelings and meet the needs that aren't being met or that you're afraid aren't being met, which is triggering the jealousy. And so, jealousy is definitely something that I have. I mean, I've gotten better about managing it and recognizing what I need, to do to feel safe and secure in my relationship. However, I still get jealous when he's on a date with someone else. So that's one thing. Another thing I would say is, there's a big thing in poly about managing the schedule of like keeping the shared calendar up to date and navigating just the time management of being non-monogamous, because there's more things to juggle. In the past year, Aaron has had a bit more free time than I have to date, because I've had a couple, work plus a couple projects going on that I've been devoting more time to. So there have been weeks or months where Aaron has been going on more dates than I have. And that's totally by choice. I could go on more dates if I wanted to, but I've been sort of choosing to put time into these other pursuits. And he's been choosing to put time into meeting people and going on dates. And so there's no problem with that. However, it does bring up feelings sometimes.
Yeah.
Either feelings of wishing that I could be going on all these dates and having fun, or feelings of jealousy or things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't say that is a problem. It's just been one more thing that came up that we talked about and kind of navigated through.
Yeah, navigating that imbalance of time and energy. Yeah. And speaking personally, I mean, we don't really go on dates with other people, but we experience that same thing in our own relationship. Yes. When one of us is way more busy at work and the other person has time to sit on the internet or pursue their own personal projects, and the other person has to work until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, it's really the same base core feeling at the end of the day, and it's just wrapped up in a different package. So I think to me, that's a benefit. It's something that you guys have the opportunity to work through together that I think a lot of people don't recognize that's what's happening in their own relationship, in a monogamous relationship, to say, oh, well, you get to do all the fun stuff and I have to do all the chores and this and that. That's something that people don't recognize as an imbalance that needs to be approached.
Or even if they might recognize it, they don't acknowledge it and talk about it. And I think that's where you gotta, because once you acknowledge it and talk about it, a lot of times you feel so much better about it, even though it's still happening and you're still kind of annoyed at the imbalance, but at least you know that you can have a conversation about it and it's not just, you aren't sitting there stewing, I guess.
Yeah.
Exactly. I totally agree. And, we're both very committed to taking responsibility for our own feelings. And we're certainly not perfect at it. And it's not always easy. But the idea of taking responsibility means that, if I notice that I'm feeling resentful because he's getting to do all the fun stuff and I'm here working, that means, it's my responsibility to bring that up and address it. it's not okay for me to sit back and stew and be resentful and then come back to Aaron 2 weeks later and say, well, I'm mad because you've been doing these things when he didn't do anything wrong. This is something we've both agreed to. And, if I don't speak up about my feelings, then, that's really not on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, it almost sounds like it's not really a jealousy from the aspect that you're jealous that he's going. Is it maybe more like he's doing it now and I don't have the chance right now? I don't know. It doesn't sound like.
Yes.
I guess maybe in a more basic term, it's not like when you guys are in the same room having sex with another couple, you're over there jealous of him. It's really more of a time imbalance that it comes up.
Yes, that's right. In that sense, it's due to the time imbalance. There have been other times when I have been straight up jealous as well. So they're all in there. But in this instance, it's more of the time imbalance.
Yeah, I think that happens to everybody, though, right? So
yeah.
That's
For sure.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the things you listed. I would say the same thing, and it's almost like I've definitely had my times of jealousy, and that still comes up here and there. Just with different interactions, and but like Samantha said, it's actually an opportunity to kind of, and we talked about this before, where if you can do that self-reflection and try to be honest with yourself about why you're having that feeling and where that thought is coming from. It's usually based out of fear or you got into a comparative mindset where you're thinking that, someone else is doing something better or they want them, not you. And it gets into this thing that really you realize you're telling yourself a story that is actually not true. And if you just talk to your partner again and say, hey, you know what, I was feeling jealous, and describe it in detail.
Yeah.
If you have a healthy communication style, then the other partner will probably just reassure you that that's not the case. They'll reassure you in their commitment to you and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's great when it works that way. And for the most part, it does for us. I definitely, in previous relationships that didn't work, if jealousy was talked about, it actually became it would put the other person on the defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of breaks down. Communication breaks down at that point. So I would say one of the things that is important is that not just that you can talk about jealousy, but that it's also you as a couple for your relationship make space for those conversations to happen in a supportive and caring way, so that someone can bring up jealous feelings and the other person doesn't immediately say, well, how dare you feel that way? I wasn't, they don't get defensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead say, oh, I totally understand. And that understanding, again, takes that self-reflection and kind of admitting to yourself that well, yeah, I get jealous too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. So.
Yeah. I think the thing that we hear over and over again when we talk to people about this is you can't communicate enough. I mean, there's really no such thing as over-communicating when you're doing this. And you mentioned something just a second ago about telling yourself a story about what the other person is. You create a narrative in your head about the thing that they did that pissed you off. And it made me think of, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, and it's really more geared towards the business world. But one of the main pieces in that is you're continually getting frustrated more and more about something because you're creating a story about this person you work with or this person in your life that's doing something, and you're creating it as a negative, they're doing it on purpose to you when they don't even have any idea that it's happening. So yeah, it's a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just made me think of it, so I blurted it out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that helps us with feeling secure and managing jealousy that we kind of discovered through some of these conversations about it is that if either of us is going on a date with another person, we always that person will send the other one a message beforehand. If we're not already together, that person will send the other person a message reaffirming the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
like kind of an extra message more than just, oh, hey, love you. It'll be like, hey, I'm so happy with you and I'm totally committed to our relationship and, I'm really in love with you or something. We're kind of mushy gushy, about all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, we just lavish it on, but that's what we do. And that's kind of our thing now, is that we do that check-in, every time before, if I'm going to go on a date with someone or if he's going to go on a date with someone. I don't know. It really helps me. And even if we're kind of just like reaffirming the same thing that we already know, it just seems to help.
It doesn't. Yeah. It never hurts to hear those things. It always feels good.
Yeah, that's
right. I can't get enough of it. I love the affirmations.
Yeah, and that really speaks to, because that works for us, and it's something that we both appreciate hearing from each other. And I guess this gets into the love languages where we probably appreciate that those
right
affection from each other. But and other couples might have different languages that they want to use and reinforce, to reaffirm that commitment with each other. But I think finding things like that you can do with and for each other to just continue to express that level of commitment is important in any relationship, whether it's non-monogamous or monogamous. But yeah, that has been a helpful approach for us, because specifically talking to the time piece of it, it's nice to get a message. If you're busy and tons of stuff going on, and that your partner's out, they finished their work and they're going on a date, but they still thought of you, before they went and did that. That feels really good. And,
yeah.
There's things like that you can explore and learn about each other, and then do those, not because it's a checklist. Like, well, if we do this checklist, then poly will work. It's like, that's not really how it works. But you realize there's meaningful things you can do for each other
that keep it working.
Yeah, to keep it working, which has to happen in any relationship. Like I said,
that's the grease for the wheels that keep it working. It's not. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you guys have any other maybe advice for people who are getting into this or just starting to get into it,
or something you wish you would have known at the very beginning?
Yeah.
For me personally, I almost wish that there was like a poly class at community colleges you go take just to get the basics down, but or some kind of curriculum. But I think that in general, what I think is most important is that, because a lot of people talk about reading all the books, reading all the articles, communication and all these things. I think that honestly, there's almost steps before that have to be done, where you need to be an emotionally healthy person. You need to know how to value and validate your own needs, desires, and wants for yourself. A lot of times people are coming from relationships, especially monogamous, and not opening up, or even just, they're single and getting into poly. But again, traditional relationship scripts are really just built on a whole bunch of unhealthy codependencies, and they're built on, really poor communication styles. The ideas that you're supposed to find in someone else the things that will make you happy is one of the most unhealthy perspectives you can have, for your own emotional well-being. And that has nothing to do with poly or swinging or non-monogamy. That just from a therapeutic sense, so many people are in therapy addressing the fact that they don't know how to feel their own feelings, talk about their own needs, communicate in a healthy way. I think that a lot of those tools are needed for everyone, and I definitely wish that, even though I was a successful adult and seemed to be able to communicate well, and navigate things in a mature way, I realized that emotionally, when it came to my needs, feelings, emotions, I was almost like I don't know about kindergarten, but definitely grade school level in being able to fully express my own feelings, emotions, and communicate them clearly in a way that I felt confident about.
Yeah.
So all those things I'm saying, that's just being a healthy individual, a whole person, instead of I'm half a person looking for my other half in this other relationship, whether it's poly or monogamous or swingers or whatever. No, I'm a whole person. I'm confident. I feel great about myself, and I'm going to go be myself with another person or other people in a happy, cohesive way. that's beneficial to both parties. So I think that would be one, is that if you're looking into poly, take that hard look at yourself and see if you've done that emotional labor. It doesn't mean that you're not ready for it. I mean, and technically everyone's always doing this emotional labor. We just talked about jealousy. It's not like we'll ever conquer these things. But if you're aware enough in it, then it's going to help you navigate all the feelings and emotions and just scenarios that it brings up. So I'd say that is just kind of take that hard look at yourself and say, like, well, how do I approach negative feelings that I have with the person I'm having them about? Do I just lash out and yell, or do I get mad? Do I stomp around and never say anything? Like, all of those are pretty common behaviors that a lot of people do, but those are the most unhealthy ways to address it. And that's just going to really cause problems in non-monogamy. All right, that was my long rambling answer, but that's me. But
that's a good answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Aaron said. You know, to add to that, non-monogamy has been great for me. You know, I would say definitely, you know, do that personal, that self-reflection and self-examination before you go into it, and be honest with yourself about whether you think that you can be non-monogamous in a healthy way. And if you do, I guess I'm saying this as if I'm giving advice or something. If you do, just know that it is possible to be non-monogamous in a healthy and happy way. And it's great when it works, you know, when, if you're able to do it personally, you know, you're stable enough emotionally and mentally and all that stuff. And, you know, you find a partner where you guys you have the trust and the honesty and the communication. It can be really great. And I'm so happy in it. You know, I just want people to know that it's an option to do that. And it's a lot better of an option than cheating. Being monogamous, but not actually because you're cheating, or being really unhappily staying with someone where you're not necessarily compatible. Things like that.
I think it's a testament to both of you guys that you both came out of relationships having tried it, and it didn't work in that relationship, and you guys didn't throw in the towel and say, well, it's obviously not possible. And you came back to it and said, well, not only is it possible, but here's how we're going to make it work, and here's how we're going to approach it in a successful and healthy way. And you didn't just look at it and say, well, it failed once, it's doomed for failure inevitably. You know, that I think that's pretty unique, maybe, and really awesome. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. I think it kind of speaks to the fact that in order to see what truly were the things that caused that's that self-reflection, and you look at it and say, well, it's not Polly's fault. It's not monogamy's fault. It's not the other partner's fault. You know, that it's like, well, can I turn internally and look at myself and say, okay, well, here are the things that I know, and now I'm speaking for myself, I know I probably should have been better at already. I'm going to do that work. And that doesn't mean, like you said, you completely throw out the idea of something else, or, you know, a different lifestyle or something. It just means that you're like, wow, I learned that I have some things to work on. And that's really important. I think that we're kind of conditioned in this society to generally try to blame, you know, whether it was our partner or whoever they met, or just non-monogamy, or maybe it was just that one night that things didn't go right. So all my feelings are all because of that. And that's what didn't work out. It's like, actually, you know, you might have feelings for some very real reasons, which might set up some rules around what you want to approach and maybe how you want to approach it. But that doesn't mean that everything that was done is a bad idea. So,
and I would take this opportunity to play devil's advocate a little bit and go back to quoting Dan Savage and say, I think this is true on the monogamy side as well, where if you were together for 50 years and out of those 50 years, one of you slipped up once and kissed somebody or slept with somebody, it doesn't mean you were bad at monogamy. You know, it means that you you were pretty damn good at it. You did it flawlessly for 49 and a half out of 50 years. That's pretty good. So
we're big Savage Love listeners,
right.
If you can't tell.
Yes, me too.
So I think it's very similar to what you're saying is like, yeah, that didn't work. Here's the things we can fix and move on. It's not monogamy's fault. It's not non-monogamy's fault. It's something in there that we're never going to be perfect. And so just being able to know that and adjust to it is important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think makes our relationship work and makes poly work for us really well is the fact that we invest a lot of time and energy into our relationship with each other. To me, I think that's a major reason why poly works for us, because I do get insecure easily. If Aaron, if I didn't totally 100% trust, that he was really into me and that we really love each other and that we're happy together, if I didn't totally trust that, and that's not to say that we don't get mad at each other ever, or we don't have, disagreements or things that come up. It's not that it's perfect. It's just that I have a really high level of trust in our relationship and his desire for me and my desire for him. So, and I think that comes from the fact that we do invest a lot of time together. We have, 2 date nights a week. We communicate all the time, like, this over communication thing. We communicate constantly and we constantly reaffirm each other. So, and that is really important, especially when you get into things like the new relationship energy, the whole NRE thing, mm-hmm. because that can be really scary. It can be wonderful, and that's a great aspect of poly, and it can be really scary because when you're in a relationship, but a longer term relationship with someone, that cannot compete with the excitement of a new relationship. That keeps us like on our toes with each other to say, hey, let's do something new and different with each other. Let's go out on a special date. Let's get dressed up. Let's do something to keep that energy fresh between us as well, because we don't want to be having all the fun on our dates with other people. And then we come home with each other and it's like, oh, okay, you again, or something like that, which is,
Yeah, I think it's easy for that jealousy to creep in when your primary relationship, or, maybe you're with your partner, what primary relationship we'll call it, is, I don't want to say stagnated, but it becomes normal, maybe a little monotonous. And then all of a sudden you're dressed up sexy going on a date and you're like, well, hey, when was the last time you dressed up like that for me? When was the last time you wore something sexy like that? Or when was the last time you were this excited to go do something with me? And I think that's awesome that you guys try to keep that same fire in your relationship. So when it happens outside of your relationship, it's not a bomb going off to blow you guys up. That's,
and that's true. And kind of the questions that you gave as examples of like, well, hey, when's the last time you dressed up that sexy for me? That's like the fear, like, oh no, jealousy feeling, and the healthy like approach to that, which we try to have, is more like, man, you look like really sexy. I want to, like, on our next date night, like, I'm going to pick a place to go, like, where you dress up sexy. Like, So having those priorities set, and this is a big thing for us. We talk, well, I talk a lot about it, but I think prioritization of time and energy, and whether it's emotional investment or financial investment, whatever, that really drives the commitment for me, at least, whether I'm married and monogamous or non-monogamous and dating or whatever it is, but it's the constant investment that proves the prioritization of time is what we're actually looking for, where it's like, hey, I know that if we set up dates on these nights that we're going to do it. I know that if we start making life goals together, that like we're going to do it, and building that trust with each other. And that's something that you have to do regularly, in whether it's a monogamous relationship or non-monogamous, so that it doesn't become stagnant. So it doesn't become just like the routine of like, well, I guess we're in a relationship, I think, but what are we doing? Like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people do kind of reach a point, they like, oh, they get married and it's like, okay, cool. I guess this is what we do now, right? And it's like, well, what do you do? Like, have some life goals. Life isn't just about reaching milestones. It's about like setting the next ones too. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
all right, well, we're going to have this many date nights and we're going to do a class together. We're going to make sure we set aside nights that we can go on dates either separately or together with other couples. Then the other life goals like house and financial goals and things like that become actually fun to talk about because it's part of the commitment with each other rather than like this draining like thing that neither of us want to deal with. Instead, something that we're emotionally and financially and just with our whole selves investing in with each other. So
right.
I think, we don't have kids at the moment, but I think that can definitely make things even harder. Or not necessarily harder, but more important to prioritize your relationship as well. Because that relationship has to, like you said, has to be a priority at times so that it works with the added stressor of children.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I know you guys we've all mentioned quite a few resources throughout this podcast, Dan Savage and the books that you mentioned. Is there anything else out there that either another book or podcast or some other resource that you think people would benefit from?
Or that you found particularly useful as you guys were getting into this?
I already mentioned Opening Up by Tristan Taormino, and I really like that book. I like how it's laid out. I like that it goes over different ways to approach non-monogamy, different styles of relationships. So I definitely recommend that. I would also recommend Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication. So it's not poly specific. He's a therapist I don't know if that's his official title actually, but he's a communication expert. Sure. And the nonviolent communication approach is I feel blank and you say the emotion of what you're feeling. I feel upset or, I feel angry or I feel jealous because my need for blank is not being met. My need for safety, my need for affirmation. Could you please blank? And then you make a specific request. That communication approach, and not that it's always done one for one exactly in that approach, but at the least starting with I feel statements and being able to state your emotions and take responsibility for those, and then also relate it to a need. Mm-hmm. To me has been super helpful in navigating poly and kind of getting to the deeper layers.
And I think that goes back to most of the problems within our relationships are not relationship specific. They're just communication or other general life problems that get amplified when sex is involved.
Mm-hmm. Just two people try to mesh their lives together too, or multiple people try to mesh their lives together.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, we wanted to really thank you guys for the time. I know we've rambled a little bit, but I think we talked about some really important topics. So thank you for spending the evening with us.
And
absolutely. It was a blast. Thanks for having us on the podcast. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Or at least I enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. It was great.
And I want to say too that, you guys, honestly was blown away talking to you guys. You guys were super insightful, and I feel like if anybody outside of this community were to listen to this, it would be hard for them to hear people like you talk about poly and swinging and come away with a negative view on it.
Exactly.
So having ambassadors like that is awesome, and we're happy to have met you guys.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside. So thank you for saying that's cool.
So we, again, as Emma said, thank you so much for taking the time. We took a huge chunk of your evening, and we appreciate it. So hopefully we can keep in touch, and we will let you guys get back to your hot yoga. I know we interrupted it for quite a while this evening. So
well, the hot yoga is done.
So okay.
All right.
Yeah, totally. Thank you guys. It was awesome talking. Let's definitely stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Yeah, good night.
Bye-bye.
thanks again to Samantha and Aaron for taking the time to talk to us. We had a really great time, learning about their views on the blend between swinging and polyamory and how that works in their relationship.
Yeah, and it was also really cool that they came on the show. We did that interview really early on, and they had no idea who we were, what we were doing. So for them to trust us with their story was really awesome. So thank you again for doing that, guys. We had a blast. Next week, we've got a really fun interview with the founders of Cassidy. They came on the show and they basically shared with us their origin story, how they got into swinging and what it looked like for them the last couple of years going through this. So that's really kind of a neat behind the scenes look into that. So you're definitely going to want to tune in next week for that.
Yeah, and that's it.
That's it. Okay, we will see you guys in a week.
Bye, everyone.